Welcome to Meeting the Inconceivable, a podcast exploring Zen koans, dreams, and the creative life produced by Pacific Zen Institute. Pacific Zen has a legacy of preserving and reimagining the koan tradition to meet our own times. With a lively community of artists, innovators, and seekers of all kinds that extends worldwide, our mission is to create a culture of transformation through meditation, koans, the arts, and conversations about the deepest matters. In this episode, Roshi Allison Atwill speaks to a koan born of a haiku by Japanese poet Santoka Taneda. This is the stone drenched with rain that points the way. Atwill offers a vivid account of what it means to be drenched with our own lives and experience, and both the vulnerability and deep meaning that accompany letting life have us fully. With anecdotes from John Muir's all-encompassing immersions in nature, and from Dostoevsky's War and Peace, this talk invites listeners into the constant downpour that is the universe itself.
This is the stone, drenched with rain, that points the way. It's raining right now. I can hear it on the roof of the room I'm in. And I've been watching the weather. I've been sort of obsessed with the atmospheric river coming, thinking, oh, maybe it won't happen, maybe it won't happen. And this sort of passionate longing for rain and not quite believing that it's here. And how much I love the sound of it on the roof this evening. Is a kind of blessing that's continuous. And I was struck by the way the rectangles on the screen, they remind me of when, especially at night when it gets dark, last night after the light goes down and everything seems to come even more forward, the colors and the in the rectangles. And in Santa Barbara, where I used to live, the train tracks ran right by the freeway for a couple miles. And sometimes at night, I'd be driving by and you could see, sometimes the train would be stopped and you could see into all of the windows, the rectangles, the different lives, the different people walking by or sitting and reading or looking out the window. And this has a feeling of that, like a train at night. I want to talk tonight about this is the stone drenched in rain that points the way. And a couple days ago, I was thinking that I had, tons of time to think about the talk, and that a koan would come to me from the miscellaneous, and this koan kept appearing. And so I don't know, I've never done this before, but I just had this feeling I should check it out with Tess. And so I sent her a note asking her if she, there's a lot of miscellaneous koans, and there's not much chance that she would had chosen the same one, but of course she did. And then we had this feeling that we were in this field of Santoka, the two of us, that instead of that we were somehow in a pas de deux instead of one person doing one portion and another portion of it. So this morning, Tess spoke about where the koan rose from, the particular life that koan appeared through him into the world, and then now is in your own hands, was placed into your hands this morning by Tess. And then what it moves through you and in your own life has its own expression. each koan is like that, like a poem or a painting. And the miscellaneous, so I talk a little bit about what it might look like to be drenched in rain. What is that? How does that appear in each person's life? And that, over and over again, I keep the koans keep bringing you back to the transformation is occurring. It occurs in your life, not in your life now, in the moment you're in now, not in a future life when you'll have the right conditions with which to transform, or you'll get rid of this attribute in your mind or in your life that you feel is an impediment to your awakening. And as you sit, all these days now, and with a kind of, I've really been touched by the courage that I feel in each of you to just stay with yourself and let yourself be drenched with your experience of your inner life and your outer life without doing anything about it, letting it pour over you and through you and dissolve some of the defenses or distance between myself and life. And you may have found many as speaking with you in Dokusan that you you may have discovered that things that rose up were not what you had hoped for in a retreat. And to think that maybe something has gone wrong with your meditation or with the koan or with your conditions. Someone told me that they were just filled with rage. They were in the house where they had teenagers and they were making this huge ruckus all around them. And the last thing they wanted was to be having these feelings of rage. And then it would vacillate between rage at the teenagers to a profound self-criticism that they had been this terrible mother that had raised these kind of children. And then staying with all of that, and then underneath and through all of that was a kind of staying with there's a kind of helplessness in our conditions, and that's a very promising moment when we give up trying to control our situation, trying to get out of the rain, but to let it soak through us, and not knowing what it will do to us and how it will change us. Other people said things like comparing mind, discovering comparing mind, just being assailed by it. And the sign-up sheets are really notorious for this. And someone who had actually a couple of people who had signed up on my list had noticed that Eduardo had gotten to see me every day, and they were, this, why is this so? What does this mean about them? What does this mean about me? What does this mean about Roddy, who had made this, this outrageous? So you might be assailed by comparing mind, to simply have the kind of searing quality of that and being hurled about. What does that do when how does that feel to be exposed in that quality of my mind? Or someone told me about being in really important business meetings, and how their practice was like really great, virtually almost all the time. But sometimes in these business meetings, suddenly they would find themselves incredibly defensive, and they felt like, oh, my practice isn't, it hasn't, it's not here. I've lost my practice somehow. But those feelings of, you know, defensiveness or peeling out sides of things or self-blame or other blame or being caught in a situation one can't that any move you make, you can't win. Someone told me this wonderful story about having, raised these roosters and a bunch of roosters and a chicken, and the roosters were just out of control and they were attacking the chickens, and there was just no way out of the situation. She loved the roosters, she loved the chickens, and one of them was, someone is going to have to be lose their life. So it was like hanging from a branch by your teeth. And the chickens were down below, asking her, why did Bodhidharma come from the West? So all of this is in the miscellaneous, and I want to talk about that this moment in particular in the miscellaneous. It does lots of things where we're becoming a young girl, we're becoming a star, we're becoming fire, and so it begins to undermine the solidity of who I think is a me, and in that way we don't hold so fiercely to a separate self and start to be able to move through situations with a little more porousness and ease. And the temple bell is one of those too, where it's a situation that's in the distance where that you can't control it, and yet the sound it's a beginning where the sound is beginning to move through you and simply receiving your situation, like hearing that's like feeling the blame, self blame is like the temple bell, or stop the dogs barking at midnight, or show me an immovable tree in a high wind. That would be being drenched in rain, that moment. Now, you'll have had moments in your meditation where it feels like you are in a high wind, some kind of hurricane blowing you about, and no one could see it. It looks like you're just sitting there really calmly, and you've got this hurricane going on in your mind and in your being. 10,000 feet down is a single stone. Also, that is that being immersed, dropping down. Someone was telling me the other day about she's at a place in her life where she just doesn't know what is going to, she really doesn't know what her life will look like in another 6 months. She doesn't have any sense, and it feels like it's all blackness and is frightening. And in the sea of Issei koan, she felt herself. The blackness was, she could at least, she couldn't see anything, but she could feel herself in the water, and she could feel she was with other life around her. And so it wasn't, even her fear didn't seem to be an impediment to having her life. So I think what I'm gonna do now, let's see, Santoka. I was struck by something that Tess said this morning. And I didn't know this about Santoka, where there was the Avalokiteshvara Sutra, the Kanan Sutra, where there was a one line in it that he kept, one section of it he kept repeating to himself as a kind of, I don't know, it held the whole of the Dharma in it for him. And one of the lines was, do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. For Santoka to be Santoka, this is the way. For Jan Brogan to be Jan Brogan, this is the way. For Martha to be Martha, this is the way. And not a Martha who's resolved the problems of the roosters and the chickens. But the Martha who's hanging from a branch by her teeth, for Martha to be Martha is the way. And the do not be afraid, I thought of it made me think of when Seamus Heaney died. He was kind of sick, and but then he had a bad fall. He ended up in the hospital in Dublin, and the next day he was scheduled for surgery to repair whatever had how he'd been injured. I don't know what that was. But he didn't make it to the morning. He died before the surgery. But just a few moments, a few minutes before he died, he texted his wife, and he wrote these two words in Latin: "Nole timara," "Nole timara," and it means "Do not be afraid." Those were his last words to her. So I think that would be Seamus being Seamus. This is the way. And but we don't always do that. Sometimes we're trying to get out of our situation and don't want the current conditions feel like they're blocking us from our awakening. And so I think this koan really contains the piece of the Dharma that whatever conditions you have right now are your current form of your awakening. They're not something that you need to transform to get to your awakening. They are your it is your awakening. The irritation that you so much disapprove of because you want to see yourself as a kind and compassionate person. And then this irritation into full-blown rage keeps appearing in your mind. That itself is the current form of your awakening. And if it keeps coming back, it's because it wants you to wake up in this portion of your life, and it keeps offering itself to you over and over again. I met with someone a couple days ago, and they said that when they had signed up for some they got the people that the teachers they were going to be meeting with for Dokusan, and then I think it might have been a day or so before retreat, and they were taking a walk with their dog, and they found themselves rehearsing all the things they were going to say to the different teachers for Dokusan. And then they realized they were doing this, and then they thought, that can't be right. And so they and then what they found just like a few minutes later, that they were rehearsing, not rehearsing for the teachers. This is the stone drenched in rain that points the way. And then I found this wonderful example of that in in Japan. I hear that ancient Japan, particularly, that it was a custom to write a death poem, like Seamus Heaney wrote one without any sort of tradition. It was one that just rose up out of his situation. The words in Latin to his wife, "Do not be afraid." And then I found this one from the 8th century, and this would be like the rehearsing of not rehearsing and rehearsing. And there's this poet who he was working with his poetry teacher for decades, and he was very concerned about his death poems. So starting at age 50, he was afraid that he might die without warning, and so this was his real fear, and he was be unable to write a really good farewell death poem, and so he's just started writing them, at age 50, and he would continually send them, to his poetry teacher for editing, and this he did this for 30 years, starting at age 50. So he's at 80, and he writes another one, and he sends it off to his teacher. And this is what he wrote: "For 80 years or more, by the grace of my sovereign and my parents, I have lived with a tranquil heart between the flowers and the moon. And so his poetry teacher, as usual, so he reads it. And his teacher writes back and he says, when you reach 90, correct the first line. And that was it. So I guess this is to say also that the being drenched in your experience and finding more of your life there is not just in the Zen tradition, it's just part of the human experience. And I've been reading War and Peace, which is like, this is a fantastic book. It's super heavy. And I have to sort of prop it up to read it. But I love it so much that it's sort of part of the experience, the difficulty of reading it. But there's a section in it where Prince Andre, he's gone off to war and he has very lofty ideas about how he's going to prove how much he loves the king and the czar and how much he loves his motherland Russia, and he'll bring glory to himself and his family. And so this is his feeling. So then he's on the battlefield in Borodino, and in this town where they finally meet the French. And he thinks to himself, here it is, the decisive moment has come. Now it's my turn. And as soon as the French start shooting at the Russians, they just panic and everyone scatters and utter chaos ensues. And so Andre, he tries to sort of find his way in the chaos here. And at one point, a Frenchman comes up to him and he hits him on the head with a very heavy, blunt object, and he is stricken and he falls to the ground. And this is what he says. What is it? Am I falling? Are my legs giving way under me? He thought, and he fell on his back. He opened his eyes, hoping to see how the fight between the French and the artillerist ended, and wishing to know whether or not the red-haired artillerist had been killed, or whether the cannon had been taken or staved. But he did not see anything. So he is still concerned with winning and losing and how things are going to turn out and how it will go. There was nothing over him now except the sky, the lofty sky, not clear, but still immeasurably lofty, with gray clouds slowly creeping across it. A quiet, calm, and solemn. Not at all like when I was running, thought Prince Andre. Not like when we were running, shouting and fighting. Not at all like when the Frenchman and the artillerist, with angry and frightened faces, were pulling at the swab. It's quite different the way the clouds creep across this lofty, infinite sky. This is like the moment the koan, watching the tracks of the birds. How is it I haven't seen this lofty sky before, and how happy I am that I've finally come to know it. Yes, everything is empty, everything is illusion, except this infinite sky. There's nothing, nothing except that, and there's not even that. There is nothing except silence, tranquility, and thank God. And then he disappears, and we don't know what happens to him. But maybe I'll have time to come back to Andre today. I don't know. And then I picked up this book. I've been sort of fascinated with hummingbirds lately too. And I never do this. I actually disapprove of this, but I picked up this book and I started reading it sort of like 9/10 into the book. And I just couldn't stop because it was a really fascinating part of the story. And it's about, this is a true story. This is about some man who goes, he's fascinated with hummingbirds too. And he goes all the way to Alaska, all the way through the Americas, all the way to Tierra del Fuego to try to see every single hummingbird that's still in existence. And he writes a book about it. And in this one place in the book where I found him, he's on an island 400 miles off the coast of South America. And it's called Robinson Crusoe Island, where these firebird hummingbirds live. And he's staying there for a week. And he ends up he's staying at this house of an older old German woman, and there's a botanist there too. And he says, "Well, you know about the woman who's running the house. You know her story, don't you?" He says, "No. What is it?" And he said, "Well, it turns out, so this is, I would guess to say, turning towards our situation, turning towards whatever's appearing in your life right now that it feels like this shouldn't be here. And it's a very small move, the stone drenched in rain, instead of the rain shouldn't be here. The rain is here. This shouldn't be happening. This is happening." So this woman, her name is Ilka, who runs this, she rents out a few rooms in her house. And it turns out that in February 27th in 2010, there was an 8.8 earthquake in South America, and it sent a tsunami headed towards these islands. But their early warning system failed, and so they didn't know about it. And there was a young girl who was about 11 years old. And she just happened to be up, it was just before dawn, I think. And she noticed that the fishing boats in the bay were straining strangely on their ropes. And then she thought, my God, it's a tsunami. So she tears off to the bell, the warning bell, and she's ringing the bell and ringing the bell, and everyone takes off for higher ground. And some people didn't make it. 16 people died in that tsunami. But this woman, the German woman, she hears the bell, but her home is right next to the ocean, and it's a very flat area where she is. And she realizes she doesn't have enough time to retreat to higher ground. And so instead of running to higher ground, she turns and she faces the wave and she runs straight for the tsunami and she dives under it. And she's an incredibly strong swimmer. She's a German woman and she survives. But her entire house is demolished. And she loved to play accordion. And so finally when her house was rebuilt, she she went to the mainland of South America to go, finally to buy furniture because they don't have anything there in the village. So she goes, takes a boat ride, gets to the South America to go buy new furniture. And when she returns, she doesn't have any furniture, but she's bought an accordion because her accordion had been smashed in the tsunami. So she apparently has the accordion whenever she feels a sorrow of the people that were lost, and to make herself, so she says, so I don't feel afraid, or when I feel afraid, I play the accordion. And one more story I'll tell you. This would be a drenched in rain, which I guess it would be another way to say it is this is the koan of show me an immovable tree in a high wind. So it doesn't need to necessarily need to be a difficult or hard moment. It can be a moment full of joy. We often we might be as afraid or threatened by joy as we are by sorrow or rage or loss. And joy can feeling at home and feeling a part of things and feeling joy can feel very exposed and unsettling in a surprising kind of way. So to enter life is to so the moment of being drenched might be a moment of joy. And this is an account by John Muir, who's just a marvelous character. He's very much like Santoka, where he just could not stay in one place, and he was tremendously restless. But instead of sake and geishas, his drug of choice was wilderness. He just could not, absolutely not get enough of it. And he's drunk on wilderness and on the light of the Sierras. He called it the range of light. And so one day, it's in December of 1874, and it's winter, and he exploring one of the tributary valleys of the Yuba River. I think some of you are near the Yuba River right now, up in the Sierra. And the sky and the ground and the trees had been thoroughly rain-washed and were dry again, and the day was intensely pure in one of those incomparable bits of California winter, warm and balmy and full of a white, sparkling sunshine. So instead of camping out like he usually does, he was going to stay with a friend who had a cabin up in the Yuba River. But as is his way, there's a storm that's blowing up and he just cannot stop himself. And so he's a storm begins to sound, he calls it. I lost no time in pushing out into the woods to enjoy it. For on such occasions, nature has always something rare to show me, and the danger to life and limb is hardly greater than one would experience crouching beneath a roof. It was still early morning when I found myself fairly adrift. So he goes on and on rapturously about his experience walking up the canyons and walking up the mountain. And then towards midday, after a long scramble through copses of hazel and ceanothus, I gained the summit of the highest ridge in the neighborhood. And then it occurred to me that it would be a fine thing to climb one of the trees to obtain a wider outlook and to get my ear close to the aeolian music of its topmost needles. But under the circumstances, the choice of a tree was a serious matter. And so he finds a tree, a Douglas spruce, and he climbs up it to the very top of the tree, on the very top of this ridge. It's about 100 feet high, and the slender tops fairly flapped and swished in the passionate torrent, bending and swirling backward and forward, round and round, tracing the indescribable combinations of vertical and horizontal curves, while I clung with muscles firm braced, like a bobolink, which is a kind of bird, on a reed. So he spends the entire storm up in a tree, feeling the wind, being blown about. And as I said earlier, that's like when you're on your cushion and you're blown about by these powerful currents of feeling or thought or compression or feeling blocked or whatever it is that's happening inside of you. And he's simply opening out into it and turning directly towards it I kept my lofty perch for hours, frequently closing my eyes to enjoy the music by itself or to feast quietly on the delicious fragrance that was streaming past. We all travel the Milky Way together, trees and men, but it never occurred to me until this storm day, while swinging in the wind, that trees are travelers. So I think I would like to read you one more piece. So that would be the turning towards joy. And even to find the joy in memory or in even a memory of a painful experience or of longing or of all of it moving through you, like on Buddha's Enlightenment Night, where Mara is moving around him and through him. And this is Nazim Hikmet. You probably know he's the Turkish poet who was imprisoned in Istanbul in a really terrible prison for many years. And he wrote a lot of poems when he was there, but I think he was in and out of prison a lot because he was it was part of his karma. He was like Santoka. With Santoka, it was, sake and geishas, and Hikmet kept like getting himself back in prison, that is part of his karma. So it starts out where he's on a train. I'm not going to read you the whole poem, this is quite long, but I'll read you a little bit of it. It's 1962, March 28th, and I'm sitting by the window on the Prague-Berlin train, and night is falling. I never knew I liked night descending like a tired bird on a smoky, wet plain. And then he references later in the poem Andre, Prince Andre, our character from War and Peace. So what I love about that is the way our own awakening spreads out through space and time. And you don't know, there's no way to know how your own life will touch and alter every other life that you encounter. Here, Prince Andre appears in a prison to Nazim Hikmet, and he appears in the poem. I didn't know I loved the sky, cloudy or clear, the blue vault Andre studied on his back at Borodino. In prison, I translated both volumes of War and Peace into Turkish. And then he goes on and on. I'll read you just the last bit of the poem before I close. I didn't know I liked the rain, whether it falls like a fine net or splatters against the glass. My heart leaves me tangled up in a net or trapped inside a drop and takes off for uncharted countries. I didn't know I loved rain, but why did I suddenly discover all these passions sitting by the window on the Prague-Berlin train? Is it because I lit my sixth cigarette? One alone could kill me. Is it because I'm half dead from thinking about someone back in Moscow, her hair straw blonde, eyelashes blue? So even your longings. The train plunges on through the pitch black night. I never knew I liked the night pitch black. Sparks fly from the engine. I didn't know I loved sparks. I didn't know I loved so many things, and I had to wait until 60 to find out, sitting by the window on the Prague-Berlin train, watching the world disappear as if on a journey of no return. This is the stone drenched in rain. It points the way.
To support these episodes or learn more about upcoming programs and retreats at Pacific Zen Institute, visit us at pacificzen.org. You'll find details on John Tarrant's Sunday Talks, our Open Temple morning meditation, and our Zen Luminary series featuring intimate conversations with scholars, poets, and teachers of koan Zen. Thanks for listening.